The freighter prospect drifted through empty space like a wounded animal. Its hull was cracked, its lights flickering, and the sound of broken air filters echoed through the dark corridors. Once a proud cargo ship, it was now nothing more than a metal coffin drifting between the stars. Inside the ruined ship, Captain Alara Vance moved slowly through the corridor, her boots crunching on shattered glass. Every step sent a sharp pain through her leg. A piece of shrapnel had grazed her thigh when the enemy torpedo hit. She ignored it. Pain was better than silence. Silence meant she was alone. Her breathing mask hissed softly as she checked the next room. The emergency lights painted everything in red. Burnt panels hung from the ceiling, and a thin mist of coolant floated in the air like smoke. The power cells were dying, and she could feel the cold creeping in. "Anyone still alive?" She called out, her voice hoarse through the comm. A deep, rough voice answered. "Here, I'm still here." Alara turned toward the sound. From behind a collapsed bulkhead, a tall figure pushed aside a steel beam with one arm. Sergeant Corrin, the alien mercenary who had joined their crew only 2 weeks ago, stumbled into view. His thick gray skin was marked with cuts, and one of his eyes flickered with the dim blue glow of a damaged cyber implant. Despite his size, he looked weak, like a giant on the edge of collapse. "You're alive," Alara said in disbelief. "Barely," Corrin replied. "The others?" She looked down. "Gone, all of them." For a long moment, neither spoke. The ship groaned around them, metal twisting as it cooled. Somewhere deep inside, a pressure valve hissed and failed. Alara forced herself to think. "We have to find a working pod," she said. "Rescue ship will arrive at dawn cycle about 8 hours from now." Corrin gave a short laugh that sounded more like a growl. 8 hours in this cold. Without power, we'll both be frozen statues long before then." Alara didn't answer. She knew he was right. Together, they searched the ship. Most of the pods had been destroyed when the main reactor exploded. The few that remained were crushed or vented into space. Every corridor they passed looked worse than the last. Walls scorched, floors cracked, the smell of ozone thick in the air. At last, they reached the lower deck. A single emergency pod was still attached to the hull, half buried in debris but intact. Its door lights were faintly green, still operational. Alara exhaled with relief. One pod left, enough to keep someone alive through the night. Corrin stepped closer, reading the status display. His deep-set eyes narrowed. "Air capacity, 1 occupant. Heat cell, 12 hours at best. 1 person survives," Alara said quietly. The truth hung heavy between them. She touched the glass of the pod. It was small, barely big enough for 1 human to lie down inside. There was a single blanket, a narrow bed built into the wall, and an emergency heater that hummed weakly. "Protocol says we draw lots," Alara said. "Equal chance, fair." Corrin shook his head slowly. "Tresh do not gamble with life. We decide by honor." Alara frowned. "Honor won't keep us warm." Corrin looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Then you take the pod. You're the captain." "I'm also the one who ordered this route through the war zone," she replied bitterly. "This is on me. You take it." They stood in silence, the emergency lights flickering over their faces. For a moment, Alara thought she saw something human in his alien eyes. Fear. The same fear she was trying to hide. She checked her wrist device. Oxygen levels were dropping faster than expected. The cold was spreading. Soon the air would freeze the breath in their lungs. "We can take turns," she suggested suddenly. "Half the night each." Corrin's head tilted. "And when we open the pod door, we lose all the heat." "Both die." She clenched her fists. "There has to be a way." He studied her quietly, then said, "Humans always look for a way even when there isn't one." "That's what makes you dangerous," she gave a small smile. "Or stubborn." He didn't smile back. "Sometimes the same thing." They cleared the debris around the pod, then sat across from each other on the cold floor. The ship's lights dimmed even further, plunging the room into a half-darkness broken only by the glow of distant stars through the cracked viewport. Alara's breath came out in small clouds. Her body shook. "We'll make it," she said, though her voice was weak. Corrin tilted his head, listening. No engine hum. No heat flow. The ship is dying. He looked around, then stood. "I will check the cargo bay. There may be a power cell left." "You can barely walk," Alara said. "You'll freeze before you find anything." Corrin's eyes glowed faintly as he turned toward her. "Then stay awake, Captain. Someone must keep the flame burning." She watched him go, the sound of his heavy steps fading into the distance. The moment he left, the silence felt sharper, heavier. The ship was so quiet she could hear her own heartbeat echo in her ears. Minutes passed. Maybe hours. Ilara tried not to think about the cold creeping through her body. She thought instead about her crew, the laughter, the songs before battle, the foolish hope that they would all make it home. Now only she and Corin remained, clinging to a dying ship like ghosts. A sudden crash echoed through the corridor. Ilara jumped up, grabbing her flashlight. She hurried toward the sound and found Corin collapsed near the cargo bay door, a broken crate beside him. His arm trembled as he tried to stand. Ilara, his voice was a rasp. Found a cell, but empty. She knelt beside him. You shouldn't have gone alone. He looked at her, his breath shallow. Humans always talk of fairness, but fairness means one lives and one dies. Tell me, Captain, is that fair? Ilara didn't answer. She could see frost forming on his armor. His body temperature was dropping fast. She helped him back to the escape pod room, both of them staggering like drunkards. When they reached it, Corin almost collapsed again. She eased him down beside the pod. Get inside, she said firmly. That's an order. No, he growled. I will not let my captain freeze for me. She crossed her arms. You're stronger than I am. You might survive the cold longer. Strength is not immunity, he said. My kind dies slower, not safer. Their eyes met again, and for a moment the war, the species, the ranks, all of it disappeared. They were just two living beings terrified of the same thing, being forgotten in the dark. Ilara finally sank to the floor beside him. Her body ached from exhaustion, but her mind refused to stop. She thought of home, Earth's blue oceans, sunlight on her skin, the laughter of her younger brother waiting for her return. She wondered if he'd ever know what happened to her. Corin broke the silence. Why do humans fight so hard to live, even when the stars turn against them? She smiled faintly. Because we don't know how to stop. He grunted in what might have been agreement. Strange creatures? Maybe, she said. But we're hard to kill. The temperature dropped again. Frost sparkled on the walls. Their breath filled the air like mist. Corin's hand trembled slightly, but he said nothing. He just watched her, the faint blue light of his implant flickering weaker each minute. Ilara looked at the pod one last time. We'll decide before the last hour, she whispered. If rescue doesn't come, Corin nodded once. Until then, we share the warmth we have. He reached into his armor and pulled out a small metallic plate. It was the insignia of his people, a mark of honor. Without a word, he placed it beside her on the floor. If I die, return this to the Teresh. Tell them I kept my word. She stared at it for a moment, then looked up at him. You're not dying tonight. The ship creaked again, louder this time, as if the universe itself disagreed. Outside the viewport, a field of broken satellites drifted past, remnants of the battle that had doomed them. Each piece of metal reflected faint starlight, tiny reminders of everything they had lost. Inside the ship, two survivors waited in the dark side by side. As the cold closed in, and somewhere in the silence, the temptation began to whisper, not of greed or lust, but of survival, the temptation to live no matter the cost. The ship had grown quieter, so quiet that Ilara could hear the ticking of the emergency heater inside the pod, a faint rhythm in a sea of silence. Outside, the stars drifted slowly across the cracked viewport, cold and distant, like unblinking eyes watching the last two lives aboard the Prospect fade away. Ilara sat on the floor beside the pod, wrapped in a torn thermal blanket. Her lips were pale and her hands shook even under the fabric. She glanced at the console. Temperature 5 degrees and falling. Oxygen 31%. They didn't have much time. Across from her, Corin sat with his back against the wall, his armor half removed to conserve heat. His thick gray skin glistened with frost. One of his breathing tubes hissed softly, leaking vapor into the air. He looked like a statue carved from stone and ice. Ilara broke the silence. Still no signal from the rescue ship? He shook his head. None, the comm array is dead. Her throat tightened. Then they don't even know we're alive. Corin's cybernetic eye flickered once. They will come. Humans always come for their own. Ilara forced a smile. You sound more sure of that than I do. He didn't reply. He just stared at the tiny pod, its door light blinking green. The color of life. One bed, one chance, hours passed. The ship continued to cool. The metal floor turned slick with frost and each breath hung in the air like smoke. Alara tried to keep moving to stay awake, but exhaustion pressed on her like a weight. Her body begged for warmth. Her mind whispered a cruel truth. If I just step into that pod now, I could live. She shut her eyes, shaking off the thought. That was the temptation speaking in the voice of survival, selfish and strong. Then Corin coughed. A rough, deep sound that echoed through the room. He tried to stand, but his legs trembled. Ilara, he rasped. I can feel the cold. In my chest. She rushed over to him, helping him sit upright again. His skin felt like stone. You need to rest, she said. He looked at her, eyes dim. Rest is death now. Stop talking like that. He smiled faintly, a strange, sad smile. You humans fear death too much. It makes you weak, she frowned. And you? You think you're strong because you accept it? He said nothing. She sat beside him, rubbing her hands together to keep the blood flowing. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence was heavier than before. Only the hum of the pod filled the room, a reminder that safety was just one door away. An hour later, the emergency light above them flickered, then died. The room plunged into darkness. Ilara cursed softly and turned on her wrist lamp. The weak white beam cut through the dark like a knife. Then the ship's computer spoke, voice faint and glitching. Warning. Life support offline. Oxygen level. Critical. Ilara stared at the readout. Oxygen 16%. They had maybe 3 hours left. Corin opened one eye. So, this is how humans end. In a box between the stars, she bit her lip. We're not done yet. He gave a small laugh that sounded more like a growl. Always fighting. Even when the battle is lost. She looked at him, tired and angry. That's what we do. That's what makes us human. Corin leaned his head back against the wall. It is what makes you dangerous. The hours dragged on. Ilara's breath grew shallow. Her head spun from the lack of air. She tried to stay awake, but her eyes kept closing. When she opened them again, Corin was no longer sitting beside her. Her heart raced. Corin? She heard movement near the pod. She turned her wrist lamp and froze. Corin was standing at the pod door, his large hand resting on the control pad. The green light glowed against his gray skin. What are you doing? She whispered. He didn't answer at first. Then he said quietly, You should be inside. You have a chance to live. Take it. She stood, swaying from dizziness. And what about you? He turned his head slightly, the blue light of his damaged implant flickering. I've lived through 3 wars. My kind does not fear the dark. Ilara stepped closer, her voice sharp. Don't you dare decide that for me. He looked down at her, calm but weary. One of us must choose. The other must accept. No, she said. We'll find another way. He tilted his head. You keep saying that. Even now. I mean it, Corin's expression softened. You remind me of a young Teresh soldier I knew once. Brave, foolish. He froze on the field rather than retreat. His name is now written in stone, but his body feeds the soil. Ilara swallowed. Maybe he died for something worth remembering. Or maybe he died for nothing but pride, Corin said. Ilara's voice trembled. If I take that pod and you die here, I'll live with that for the rest of my life. Don't make me carry that. For a long time, Corin said nothing. The hum of the pod filled the silence again, soft and steady, like a heartbeat in the dark. Finally, he spoke. There is something you should know. He reached into a compartment on his armor and pulled out a small metal drive. It glowed faintly blue. This, he said, holding it up, contains the coordinates of a Teresh research base. The Dominion planned the ambush at Sindar Station. They wanted to break the alliance before it began. Ilara's eyes widened. You had this the whole time? He nodded. If I die here, that truth dies with me. But if you live, you can stop them. Save your people. She stared at him, realization striking her like a cold wave. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about something far bigger. Corin stepped aside, leaving the pod door open. Go, humanity will need that information. She didn't move. Her body screamed at her to step inside, to breathe the warm air, to survive. But her heart refused. If I live because you die, she whispered, then I'm not saving anyone. He looked at her, a faint smile crossing his lips. You humans, always making everything about meaning. She laughed softly, though her throat hurt. And you aliens, always pretending you don't understand it. For a brief moment, they both smiled. Two exhausted soldiers sharing the smallest spark of humor in the frozen dark. Minutes later, another alarm sounded. Warning. Thermal core depleted. Cabin temperature falling below survival threshold. Ilara's vision blurred. The edges of the room began to shimmer. She could feel her heartbeat slowing. Corin leaned heavily against the wall. Go, he said again, weaker this time. She shook her head. Not without you. Ilara, no, she snapped. You think dying for honor means something. But sometimes living is harder. You said humans are dangerous because we never stop fighting. Then let me prove it. Corin stared at her for a long time. Then slowly he lowered the data drive into her palm. His hand was cold, heavy. If you live, he said softly, carry this truth. I will, she whispered. But you're not dying tonight. Her words felt hollow, but she meant them. Hours passed in silence. The cold deepened. Both of them drifted in and out of half-consciousness. At some point, Ilara heard a sound. Faint, rhythmic, a pulse. She opened her eyes and saw Corin sitting motionless, his breath shallow but steady. She looked at the pod again. The green light still blinked. So close, so easy. Her body wanted to move. Her mind screamed at her to survive, but her heart, the stubborn, fragile human heart, told her to stay. So she did. She sat beside him, shoulder to shoulder, as the stars moved silently outside. Every breath burned. Every second felt like forever. The temptation never stopped whispering. But she refused to listen. Because sometimes humanity's greatest strength isn't power or intelligence or survival. It's choice, the choice to care even when it hurts. The choice to stay even when you could leave. The choice to be human no matter the cost. The darkness inside the freighter prospect had turned heavy and still. The sound of the ship, once filled with the hum of engines and distant chatter, was gone. Now there was only silence, broken by the faint rasp of two dying breaths. Captain Ilara Vance sat slumped against the cold wall beside the escape pod. Her head felt heavy, her vision blurred, and every breath came like a blade through her lungs. Frost had crept across her uniform and hair. She didn't know how much time had passed. An hour? 2? Maybe more. Time had lost meaning in the dark. Beside her, Corin was barely moving. His massive frame had gone still except for the slow rise and fall of his chest. His cybernetic eye was dim, almost dead, its faint blue light pulsing, weakly every few seconds, like the last heartbeat of a machine. Ilara forced her frozen fingers to move. She reached out and checked his pulse. It was faint, but still there. Relief washed through her chest. He was alive. For now. Her eyes drifted toward the escape pod. The door light was still glowing green. Calm, steady, cruel. Inside, the heater hummed softly. The air inside was clear, warm, safe. It was only a few steps away, a few steps between life and death. Her mind screamed at her to move. She could still save herself. She could get inside, breathe, survive. If she didn't, both would die here, and all the sacrifices, her crew, the battle, the war, would mean nothing. Ilara's heart pounded in her chest. She thought of Earth, the blue oceans, the sound of wind through the trees, her brother's laugh, her mother's voice. She thought of home, and the unbearable idea that she would never see it again. Then she looked at Coran, the alien who should have been her enemy, the soldier who had risked his life to protect a ship that wasn't his. And she remembered his words, "You humans always come for your own." A tear rolled down her frozen cheek, freezing halfway. She knew what she had to do. She didn't hesitate anymore. Ilara crawled toward the escape pod. Her body screamed in pain, her muscles numb and trembling. When she reached the control pad, she took one last look at the glowing green light. Then she turned back to Corin. He was unconscious now, his breath shallow, his body still. His massive frame looked too heavy to move, but she would not leave him there. "Not like this. Come on," she whispered through chattering teeth. "You carried that honor all this way. Now let me carry you." It took everything she had left. She hooked her arms under his shoulders and began to drag him inch by inch toward the pod. Every movement felt like fire in her lungs. Her arms shook, her legs gave out. But she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. Her vision swam. Her breath came in short, painful gasps. But still she pulled. At last she reached the pod. She pressed the button and the door slid open with a hiss of warm air. The sudden heat felt like sunlight after an endless night. She pushed Corin's body inside, guiding his head gently against the soft padding. The pod's internal sensors beeped as it detected a living form. The screen read, "Occupant identified. Life support active." Alara smiled weakly. Good. That's good. She reached for the small data drive still in her pocket, the one Corin had given her, and placed it inside his hand. Then she closed his fingers around it. "Keep your promise," she whispered. She knew the pod could only support one life. Once it was sealed, it would not open again until rescue arrived. That was the design. There would be no second chance for her. Her strength was fading fast. The edges of her vision darkened. But before sealing the pod, she reached up to the communication console above it. The system was weak, but one small transmitter light still blinked, red and dying but alive. She pressed the manual record button. Her voice trembled, soft and tired. "This is Captain Ilara Vance of the freighter Prospect. Coordinates attached. 2 survivors found after the Battle of Sindar Station. 1 Teresh soldier on board with vital data concerning Dominion betrayal. If you receive this, he's not the enemy. We are. If we forget what it means to be human." Her voice cracked on the last word. She took one last shaky breath, then added quietly, "Tell my brother I kept my promise." She pressed the send key. A faint hum filled the air as the message broadcast into the void. Then the light on the transmitter went out. Alara looked at Corin one last time. He looked peaceful now, his chest rising and falling slowly. The blue light of his cybernetic eye glowed faintly, reflecting in the pod's glass like a distant star. She smiled through tears she could no longer feel. "Sleep well, soldier," she whispered. "You've earned it." With trembling fingers, she pressed the final button on the control pad. The pod door slid closed with a hiss, sealing him inside. The glass fogged for a second, then cleared as the internal systems activated fully. The pod light changed from green to steady blue, occupied. Alara sank to the floor beside it, her back against the cold metal wall. The warmth from the pod's heater brushed faintly against her skin, but it wasn't enough. The cold crept in like a tide, unstoppable. Her body shivered once, then stilled, but her face remained calm, peaceful, as if, in that final moment, she had found something greater than survival, something human. Hours later, silence ruled the Prospect. The ship drifted endlessly through the void, a ghost among the stars. Then, faint and distant, a new sound echoed through the wreck, the sharp tone of a docking latch. A rescue ship had arrived. The outer hull was cut open. A small team of human rescuers floated inside, lights sweeping across the dark corridors. Their commander's voice came over the comm. "Scan for survivors, the signal came from here." The first rescuer entered the escape pod chamber. His light landed on the frozen figure of Alara Vance, sitting beside the pod, her head resting against the wall, eyes closed. "Commander," he whispered. "We found someone. She's gone." Then his light caught the escape pod. The blue indicator still blinked. "Wait, the pod's active." They hurried forward, prying open the seal. Warm air rushed out as the door lifted. Inside lay Corin, breathing shallowly, wrapped in the survival blanket. His cybernetic eye flared to life as the light touched him. "He's alive!" one of the rescuers shouted. The commander stepped closer. "Get him to the medbay, now!" And they carried Corin out. The commander noticed something on the floor near Alara's hand, a small data chip with the Alliance symbol carved on its edge. He picked it up, eyes widening as he read the tag. Dominion betrayal, priority 1 evidence. He looked at her frozen form and whispered, "You saved us all, Captain." Weeks later on the medical ship Aurora, Corin awoke. The soft light of the med chamber reflected on the walls as machines hummed quietly around him. For a moment he didn't remember where he was. Then the memories returned. The ship, the cold, Ilara's face in the dark. He looked down and saw the data drive resting on the table beside his bed. A human insignia was carved into it, the symbol of the prospect. A nurse entered, smiling gently. "You're lucky. The rescue team found you just in time. The captain's message led them straight to your coordinates." Corin's throat tightened. "The captain..." The nurse's smile faded. She didn't need to say anything. Corin turned away, his massive hands gripping the blanket. For a long moment he sat in silence. Then slowly, he picked up the data drive. "I will keep her promise," he said quietly. Months later, the Teresh Dominion's secret betrayal was revealed. The files that Ilara saved exposed everything. The ambush, the manipulation, the lies. The Alliance survived because of her. In the halls of the Interstellar Council, both human and Teresh delegates stood together for the first time. At the ceremony, Corin stepped forward dressed in a clean uniform. He placed a new star marker into the holographic map of the galaxy. It glowed bright and white against the black field. He spoke softly. "This star will bear the name of Captain Ilara Vance, human resolve. For she showed us all that honor and compassion are not bound by species, only by choice." As the star's light filled the chamber, the crowd stood in silence. Far away in the endless dark of space, the wreck of the Prospect still drifted quietly, and through its cracked windows, one could almost imagine the faint reflection of a human smile. Proud, defiant, eternal. Because sometimes, even when humanity loses everything, it leaves behind something greater than survival. It leaves behind hope.